Hey guys, I'm your host Matt, and we're here to talk about my take on the Dolphins versus the Bills on the Matt Newton Football Show. Now, the Dolphins lost to the Buffalo Bills in heartbreaking fashion, 30 to 27, on a sort of last-minute field goal to the Buffalo Bills, with a Tyler Bass 61-yard field goal to seal the win for Buffalo. But as disappointing as this game was, there were certain things that the Dolphins did very well that give you hope for the rest of the season. Will that hope be able to extend beyond this season? It's hard to tell. But at least for the time being, the Dolphins showed that they were able to hang with a team in the AFC that basically is a Super Bowl contender. And there's no such thing as moral victories in the NFL. I do know that. I'm sure most fans would agree. But the thing is, the Dolphins were able to play probably the best overall game that they've played probably in the last 10 or so games. And that's very good for the Dolphins because I believe the Dolphins were able to show a lot of growth in a lot of areas on the offensive side of the ball. And it really starts with Mike McDaniel. If you watch this channel and you watch some of my videos over the offseason, you see that I was very critical about Mike McDaniel in terms of how he uses his personnel packages, how he distributes the ball on the field, how he abandons the running game, and how he can get his running backs more involved in the passing game to keep the offense going forward. The good thing is for Mike McDaniel is that I'm not saying that he necessarily saw my videos. He's a professional head coach and he knows how to run an NFL offense. But it's good to know that some of the things that I suggested in those videos are being implemented this season. And one of the things that I talked about ad nauseum on this channel was Devon Achane getting involved in the passing game more often. And I don't really see Devon Achane as necessarily being a workhorse 3-down back. But I do think that if he gets about 15 to 18 touches a game, whether it be 12 runs and maybe 6 targets, that kind of workload I think is best for him. You can leave him in the backfield where he can churn some tough yards if he needs to. He can take the ball around the outside and run the wide zone offense. But he can also catch screen passes and shorter passes and convert them into longer gains because if you watch this video channel over the offseason, you would see that Devon Achane actually had more yards after the catch per reception than even Tyreek Hill on the team. So it's a good idea to get him the ball in space when you could so that he can make shorter passes, less riskier passes, and still be able to produce offense as a result of that. So for me, I think that Mike McDaniel has shown a lot of growth in this area. And again, it's a topic that I covered over the off season. So if you go back and you want to look, I'll link a description in this video so that you can go back and take a look at those videos. But it's good to see that Mike McDaniel really did a good job of making sure that the running backs get involved in the passing game. Another thing that Mike McDaniel has been doing, and it's been a trend that we've seen, and it's something that I advocated for, was Mike McDaniel sticking with the run game even when Tua Tagovailoa returns to the lineup. And for the most part, he did that. In the first 2 games with Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins have run for more than 150 yards in each game. Prior to that, the 2 games prior to that, Mike McDaniel and the offense ran the ball for close to 200 yards in those games. So the Dolphins have definitely made a concerted effort to make sure that the running backs are involved on the ground and in the air. And that's what this offense needs. And I mean, to be honest with you, it's a little bit frustrating because, truth be told, this kind of stuff should have been done last season and maybe even the season before. And the reason why I say that is when Mike McDaniel first started this high-octane passing offense, the idea was that he was taking advantage of play-action passing and getting the ball over the heads of the linebackers, throwing the ball in front of the covered 3 cornerbacks, and Tua and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle was making a living doing that. Then the offense kind of shifted to the cheat motion and some of the skinny posts that they run on offense, some of the deep square in passes they use. So they were attacking the middle of the field in between the hashes with reckless abandon. But the problem with that is that defenses are going to adjust. And my criticism at the time when all this stuff was happening was that I expected Mike McDaniel to have a counter for that. Once linebackers started playing deeper and deeper and they started to go into cover 2 and cover 4 shells, the Dolphins would have to be able to be prepared to throw the ball underneath, get the ball into the hands of their running backs and their tight ends, and even to their wide receivers in crossing routes, slants, even some mesh concepts. These are the kind of plays that the Dolphins will have to use to counter the linebackers and the defensive backs dropping back with anticipation that the Dolphins want to get the ball and collect chunk plays going to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So while I do applaud Mike McDaniel for kind of seeing the truth for what it is, right? That teams are taking away these deep passes, and now it's time for him to make a concerted effort to throw the ball underneath. This is the game plan that you would use to counter what defenses have done for the Dolphins for the greater part of, I would say, 12 to 16 games or so. And it seems like the adjustment has come kind of late. But even in the week 1 game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, you can see the Dolphins were trying to get the ball to their running backs and to their tight ends a little bit more. In the first game of the season against the Jacksonville Jags, I believe Devon Achane was second on the team with targets behind Tyreek Hill. In the second game versus the Buffalo Bills, he was the leader in targets and had the most receptions and reception yards in that game. And now that Tua's back, in the last 2 games that he's played versus the Cardinals and against the Buffalo Bills, Devon Achane has been a target hog in those games as well. So clearly the Dolphins have seen that throwing the ball underneath, taking what the defense gives you, and especially when the defense is giving all this space underneath, it will behoove you to make sure that those guys get involved early and often. But now, this is where I caution Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins' offensive brain trust that you cannot do this all the time. You cannot run the ball in between the tackles and run the ball to the edges and throw screen passes and little dump-off routes to the flats, because eventually the defense is going to adjust and they're going to start moving in closer to the line of scrimmage, maybe even adding a 7th, maybe even an 8th defender in the box. And this is when you now have to be prepared to pivot. This is where the chess game begins. Now the defenses will come to the line of scrimmage to try to take away those short passes. And, they're going to figure that, hey, we're either going to get, a slow death by, little small pricks, or we're going to give it the big play and, be defeated that way. So it all depends on the defense picking their poison. A lot of people don't like to take those, 1,000 small stabs or whatever they call it. They rather just take chances, take risks, blitz the quarterback. And if they make a play over their head, then so be it. They'll give up the big play if need be. But the fact of the matter is the Dolphins have shown in the last couple seasons that they're pretty adept at throwing the deep ball. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, those guys, once they get behind the secondary or get one man-to-man coverage, they can exploit those kinds of matchups. So teams would be reluctant knowing how efficient Miami can be when it comes to throwing the ball down the field. So what the Dolphins offense has to be prepared for, you have to be prepared for this, Mike. Don't wait until the defense starts to adjust. Now you're playing with this brand of football going into the Rams game, going into the next few weeks, and you're thinking, okay, this dink and dunk game is going to work for the rest of the season and we're going to milk that. That's not how the NFL works. Eventually, defenses will adjust to these passes in the flat, these passes to the running backs, and they will start to creep up to the line of scrimmage. That's when you have to be prepared now to throw the ball over their heads and make chunk plays in the passing game like you were doing before, right? This is the ebb and the flow of play calling. You want to be able to keep the defense off balance, but to do that, you have to anticipate how the defense is going to defend you and prepare adequate, sufficient, appropriate, whatever word you want to use, counter punches to these defensive formations and these defensive alignments so that you can always have the upper hand on the defense. And to me, that's where the game becomes, for me again, it becomes a chess match. You have to be able to out-coach the other team's defensive coordinator to make sure that you're always a step ahead of them. And this is where Mike McDaniel has to take the next step in becoming a great play caller. First he got a scheme that fits his quarterback and was able to produce a high-powered, high-scoring offense that was very productive. So, he kind of, passed stage 1 of being an offensive play caller and play designer. Now, finally, 3 years in, he's finally reached stage 2, right? He's now able to complement and counteract what he was doing before by using plays that now take advantage to what the defenses have done to adjust to the Miami Dolphins offense. So now he's in stage 2. He's made the necessary adjustments to, keep the offense on schedule and keep them running efficiently. If you look at the Dolphins' numbers against Arizona and against the Bills, Tua Tagovailoa was very efficient in those games. He didn't throw any interceptions. He didn't turn the ball over. And I think in this last game, he was 24 out of 27 for 250 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. So this is the kind of efficiency you'd like to see from the Dolphins when teams play back and they want to take away all these deep passes. Now you have to run this kind of like very efficient short passing game in order to counteract that. But it's not going to last forever. Defenses will adjust, and they will start bringing guys close to the line of scrimmage. They'll start playing a little bit more cover 2 to try to take away some cover 2 man and cover 2 zones, especially cover 2 zones to take away some of those flat passes. They're going to be prepared for the screen passes, right? They'll lock in under the running backs and man coverage to take away some of these screen passes. So the defenses will do that. So that's when you have to be prepared. When they go in man defense to try to take away those screen passes, you'll know that your wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, now is in man coverage. Also, if you see the defense is playing cover 2 man cover 2 zone, and they're creeping up to the line of scrimmage to try to take away the run and keep their eyes on the quarterback, that's when you have to hit that little hole between the safety and the cornerback to make sure that you exploit that defense. So now this is where it becomes a chess match for Mike McDaniel. And, I hope he's up to the challenge. He's a very bright and intelligent coach. There's no doubt about that. It's taken him a little bit long, in my opinion, to make these adjustments. These adjustments should have been well fleshed out well before teams started to counter what the Dolphins are doing on offense. This backup plan, this counterpunch should have already been thought of and kept in your back pocket for when these adjustments were to be made. It almost seems like Mike McDaniel and the coaching staff were completely blindsided by how teams were going to defend it. Maybe they thought it was unstoppable and it couldn't be stopped in the NFL. But if you know anything about the history of the NFL, eventually defenses will adjust. So Mike McDaniel did not come with an adjustment in the appropriate time that I would have liked to have seen, but it seems as though he's getting there. So now the next challenge is, now that you can move the ball efficiently, throwing the ball underneath, now you're going to see defenses start to adjust to that. And now Mike McDaniel has to be a step ahead of the defense so that he doesn't repeat what he did in the first iteration of the Dolphins offense, which is this deep passing game. Now he'll be able to counter with passes down the field and hit those places on the field that he wants to hit, right? The areas in between the seams, 12 to 15 yards downfield. He wants to hit some of these plays on the sidelines, these deep comeback routes. So those things will open up, but you have to give the defense something to respect. And too often times, Mike McDaniel will try to force the ball into areas where the defense were covering, or sometimes in some cases, they were over covering, if that's such a term, right? They were allocating a lot of resources to taking away those medium, intermediate throws. And now the Dolphins seem like they finally have a counter to that. So we'll see how the defenses adjust to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how Mike McDaniel adjusts to the defense once they adjust, because it'll give me an idea exactly what kind of offensive head coach Mike McDaniel is. But so far, he's made progress. The progress is a little bit slower than I would have liked to have seen, quite honestly, but he is making progress. So that's a good thing. So if there's anything to take away from this 2-6 start, obviously it's been terrible for Dolphin fans. The idea of them making the playoffs at this point, seems, very remote. But if there's anything positive to take away from this 2-6 start, is that it seems as though Mike McDaniel, the light bulb has come on for Mike McDaniel. And he's finally doing something that seems as though he's ready to make the necessary adjustments to how the defense adjusts to him. The question is also whether Mike McDaniel can make some of these adjustments in game. That's the next step. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, I'm trying to look at this early part of the season as being a stepping stone, maybe not for this season, 2024, but perhaps 2025. So let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment in the section below, and I'll see you in the next video.